What is it about money, specifically money that someone else earned, that turns perfectly reasonable adults into absolute gremlins? Today, we have 6 stories about wills, inheritances, and the kind of financial betrayal that doesn't just burn bridges, it salts the earth. These aren't small disagreements. We're talking secret codicils, forged documents, missing cash, and one family that imploded over a piece of jewelry worth less than a used car. Stay until the end. Story 6 has an update that made my jaw physically leave my face. Let's get into it. Our first story is a classic. Someone did everything right, and their sibling wants half the credit anyway. The narrator is the youngest of 3. Growing up, the 2 older siblings left for college and never really came back. Holidays, maybe. The occasional birthday call. The narrator stayed local, drove their grandmother to every single medical appointment for 6 years, managed her bills, handled her property taxes, and was essentially her entire support system. When Grandma passed, her will left the house and savings, about $240,000 total, entirely to the narrator. The 2 older siblings got sentimental items and a small cash amount each, roughly $8,000. That's not nothing. But the eldest sibling lost her mind. She called the narrator a manipulator, claimed Grandma was mentally unfit when she updated the will 4 years ago, and threatened to contest it in court. She even drove 4 hours to show up at the narrator's door and scream on the porch about what Grandma would have wanted. The narrator asked her politely to leave. She did not leave politely. Here's where it gets good. A few weeks later, they posted an update. The eldest did hire a lawyer and filed to contest the will on grounds of undue influence. During discovery, the attorney requested Grandma's medical records, which showed she was sharp as a tack at the time of the update, had a witness present, and had actually told her own doctor she was finally getting her affairs in order the right way. The court dismissed the challenge in under 60 days. Legal fees cost the eldest over $9,000, more than her entire inheritance. The narrator sent a single text. "I hope this brought you closure." No response. Host verdict, NTA. And honestly, the court already said so. Drop your verdict in the comments. Story 2 is a little more morally complicated, and I love it for that. So the narrator's uncle passed away after a long illness and left a very detailed will. The bulk of the estate, a commercial property worth real money, went to charity and to 2 of his 3 nephews. The 3rd nephew, let's call him the cousin in question, got nothing. 0. Not even the vintage watch collection everyone assumed he'd get. The cousin was devastated and kept asking the family why. And here's the thing. The narrator actually knew why. Before he died, the uncle had confided that the cousin had borrowed $15,000 from him years ago, promised to pay it back, and never mentioned it again. The uncle wasn't angry. He'd quietly deducted it from the inheritance and felt the matter was settled. But he never told the cousin that's what he'd done. The cousin started spinning conspiracy theories. Maybe the other 2 brothers had manipulated the uncle. Maybe the attorney made an error. And the family kept letting him spiral. The narrator finally sat him down and explained exactly what happened. Here's where it gets good. A few weeks later, they posted an update. The cousin went completely silent for 2 weeks. Then he called the narrator, not to yell, but to say thank you. Knowing the reason, even a painful one, let him stop being angry at the wrong people. He reached out to the 2 brothers he'd been freezing out, apologized, and apparently paid the $15,000 to the charity named in the will as a kind of tribute. The narrator said the family actually had a real dinner together for the first time in years. Sometimes the truth is a gift, even when it stings. Host verdict, NTA. And this might be the most unexpectedly wholesome update we've ever had on this channel. Someone screenshot this for me. Oh, this one. This one is delicious. The narrator's grandfather was a very organized man, a retired accountant who spent the last decade of his life quietly settling his affairs. 3 years before he passed, he met privately with each of his grandchildren and gave them their inheritance directly, in cash and transferred assets, to avoid probate and family drama. He made each grandchild promise not to discuss it until after he was gone. The narrator received their share, a substantial amount, and honored that promise completely. Fast forward to grandfather's death. The will, which was designed to be a formality at this point, listed only small symbolic amounts for the grandchildren since the real distributions had already happened. The narrator's parents, who had apparently expected to inherit something themselves and got less than they'd imagined, decided the grandchildren had been treated unfairly. In a truly audacious move, the narrator's own parents began lobbying the other grandchildren to pool any inheritance and redistribute it more fairly, i.e., give some to the parents. The narrator played completely dumb through every family meeting, every phone call, every group text. Here's where it gets good. A few weeks later, they posted an update. The narrator finally revealed, at a family dinner where the pressure had reached a peak, that grandfather had settled everything years ago, and that every grandchild had already received exactly what grandfather intended. The room went very quiet. The parents had been trying to redistribute money that was already invested, already spent, already gone. The grandfather had outmaneuvered their greed from beyond the grave. The narrator said Grandpa had even mentioned, when he handed over the envelope, that he didn't want anyone squabbling. He'd known exactly what he was doing. Host verdict, NTA, and Grandpa is the real main character of this story. A round of applause for the man. We're switching gears. This one has a twist in the narration, because our storyteller is not clearly in the right. The narrator's mother was in a memory care facility and had given the narrator power of attorney several years before her condition progressed. The family home had been sitting empty, costing property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. The narrator, acting as POA, decided to sell it. Used the proceeds to fund a top-tier care facility for their mother, paid off a few of her remaining debts, and invested the rest in a managed account for her ongoing care costs. Completely legal, completely within POA authority. The brother, who had been loosely assuming he'd inherit the house someday, came home from a work trip abroad to find it had been sold, staged, and was already under new ownership. He hadn't been notified because the narrator, and this is the part where I raise an eyebrow, felt he would have just caused delays. Here's where it gets good. A few weeks later, they posted an update. The brother consulted an attorney and confirmed that yes, the sale was legally valid. But in the process, the attorney flagged that the POA agreement actually required the narrator to make reasonable efforts to notify interested family parties before major asset decisions. The narrator hadn't violated the law, but they had violated the spirit of that clause. The attorney sent a formal letter. No lawsuit followed, but the brother used that letter to successfully petition to be added as a co-agent on any future financial decisions. The narrator admitted in the update they probably should have made one phone call. Host verdict, ESH, honestly. The law was followed. The relationship didn't have to be broken. What do you think? Comment below. Welcome to Story 5, which is giving full courtroom drama energy, and I am here for every second of it. The narrator's grandfather passed and left a fairly large estate, property, savings, some investments. The estate was to be divided among his 3 adult children, the narrator's mother, an uncle, and an aunt. The aunt had been appointed executor because she lived closest and had, quote, a head for finances. For 8 months, the aunt managed the estate process. During that time, the narrator, who works in financial compliance, which is very unfortunate for the aunt, noticed some irregularities in the estate accounting documents she'd shared with the family. Specifically, a recurring transfer to an account number that didn't match any account on the official estate inventory. The narrator quietly traced it. It led to a personal savings account in the aunt's name that had received over $31,000 in transfers from the estate over those 8 months. At the formal estate reading, with the attorney present, the narrator produced printed documentation and laid it on the table. Here's where it gets good. A few weeks later, they posted an update. The aunt initially tried to claim it was reimbursement for executor expenses, a claim that collapsed immediately when the attorney noted that executor expenses require receipts and prior written authorization from co-beneficiaries. The estate attorney reported the discrepancy to the probate court. The aunt had to repay every dollar plus interest, was removed as executor, and a professional fiduciary was appointed to finish the process. There's also, the narrator noted quietly, a pending referral for potential fraud charges, though that's still unresolved. The mother and uncle split the estate fairly. Nobody invited the aunt to Christmas. Host verdict, NTA. And honestly, this is why you don't put a fox in charge of the henhouse. Financial compliance workers. We see you. Story 6. I promised you an update you wouldn't see coming, and I meant it. The narrator had a complicated relationship with their stepfather. Not bad, not warm, just distant. When the stepfather was in his final weeks, he called the narrator privately and pressed a valuable antique pocket watch into their hand. Said it had belonged to his own father, that he had no biological children, and that he wanted the narrator to have it. It was appraised later at around $14,000. The stepfather passed. 2 weeks into grief, the narrator's mother pulled them aside and explained, with surprising composure, that the watch had not been mentioned in the formal estate documents and that the stepfather's sister was claiming it belonged to the broader estate and should be liquidated and split. The mother told the narrator they should probably just give it back to keep the peace. The narrator was stunned. This was a direct, witnessed deathbed gift. One the narrator had even texted a friend about the same day it happened, time-stamped. The narrator said no. The mother stopped speaking to them for a month. Here's where it gets good. A few weeks later, they posted an update. And this is the part. The narrator did some research and discovered that in their jurisdiction, a witnessed personal gift given by a mentally competent person before death does not automatically form part of the estate, especially with contemporaneous documentation. But more than the legal outcome, which did favor the narrator, what actually happened is this. The stepfather's sister, during the dispute process, revealed that the stepfather had written a private letter to the narrator, handed to the sister to deliver after his death, that she had been sitting on for weeks. In it, he said that he'd always considered the narrator a child of his heart, even if never of his name, and that the watch was the only thing he had to give that felt like enough. The narrator said they read it 3 times before they could breathe. They kept the watch. Their mother read the letter, called crying, and apologized. Host verdict, NTA. And sometimes the update isn't about winning. It's about finding out someone loved you more than you knew. 6 stories. Secret accounts, outmaneuvered parents, a grandfather who played 4-dimensional chess from beyond the grave, and a pocket watch that held a letter nobody knew existed. The question I want you to answer in the comments is this. Which of these people made the right call? And which one would you have handled differently? Subscribe if you want more long-form stories like this every week. And don't go anywhere. Next week, we're covering the most unhinged neighbor disputes the internet has ever produced. You think inheritance gets ugly? Wait until someone puts a fence 2 feet over the property line. See you there.